Here's what's coming up on The World Today. The Taliban says there is no more war in Afghanistan and it is set to announce a new government. Also promising a new government is Guinea's military junta 24 hours after ousting President Alpha Condé. Plus, Muammar Gaddafi's son Saadi Gaddafi is cleared of killing the Libyan football coach and released from prison. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. The Taliban is promising, like they have in the past week, it will be announcing a new government soon. And that promise was reiterated by the group's spokesman, Zabihullah Mujahid, during a news conference in Kabul. It comes hours after the militants declared it had completed the takeover of Afghanistan after days of fighting in Panjshir province.
Zabihullah Mujahid's announcement was made this afternoon in Kabul. He told journalists the last nest of the fugitive enemy was completely cleared today and last night. All forces of the Islamic Emirates are present there, referring to Panjshir. Then he said work was underway on technical issues so that a new government is announced most likely in a few days. He also debunked what he calls rumors about internal disputes in the Islamic Emirate, as they were trying to gather advice and opinions to make a strong decision to establish a stable, strong Islamic system. In another interview, Deputy Head of the Taliban's Cultural Commission, Ahmadullah Wasik, said the group would hold a special ceremony to announce the establishment of a new government and will invite guests from home and abroad to attend. He claimed representatives from Russia, Qatar, Turkey and other countries will be invited to attend the ceremony as well. Kabul residents, on the other hand, are keen to see what the new government will look like. Many are more interested in the availability of jobs. They want the government to provide employment and to open up factories. They also want members of the Taliban to wear uniforms in order to reduce confusion and more clearly identify themselves. The Taliban continues to call for unity, saying its wish is for people within the nation to cooperate, calling anyone who resisted or took up arms as an enemy of the country and the people. Whether or not the people believe and will offer their full cooperation with the militant group will most likely be determined in the coming days.
The VOA's Aisha Tanzim is in Islamabad for us. Aisha, thank you for joining me on the show and thank you for all the reporting on the Afghan situation when it started. But bring us up to speed with what's happened over the weekend up until now. The Taliban claiming it now has full control of Afghanistan, or the Islamic Emirates as it prefers to call it. What does that entail?
Well, first of all, fighting intensified in Panjshir Valley, which was the last stronghold of what was called the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, led by Ahmad Massoud, the son of Ahmad Shah Massoud. You remember the old Massoud, Ahmad Shah Massoud, who was called the Lion of Panjshir and who successfully resisted Taliban onslaught. And Panjshir was never under Taliban rule in the 90s when they had the government previously in Afghanistan. This time, while the Taliban claim they've taken over the country and routed out the resistance, there is a message from Ahmad Massoud saying he's still in Panjshir and he's still continuing to fight. Earlier in the day, there was a message from the Resistance Front, Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, saying that they had to retreat to the mountains to be able to regroup and establish their supply lines. The resistance accounts said that they will lie low for a while until they establish supply lines, make their new strategy, but resistance will continue. Meanwhile, Taliban are now in the capital of Panjshir and they've issued videos of their fighters in the provincial capital and putting up Taliban flags on government buildings. And as your earlier report said, Zabihullah Mujahid, the main Taliban spokesman, had a press conference today, said the announcement of a government is imminent. They've said it before, but he said there are some technical issues holding back that announcement. Now, the Taliban have promised this government to be inclusive, and the world has made very clear that if the government is not inclusive, the group will not receive the aid and legitimacy it craves. But until recently, there were no indications that Taliban had made deals with any of the minorities in Afghanistan. And they've indicated that there will be no women, at least at the cabinet level, although they've said women will be working at the lower levels of government, especially in the health and education ministry.
So we're hearing that, in some parts of Afghanistan, people are looking forward to this new government. If you do ask questions in Kabul, people are terrified, but it seems like on the outskirts, in the smaller villages, people do seem to be happy that the Taliban has taken over. What are you hearing as regards who and who would probably make this government, and then, how a government would rule over Afghanistan at this point?
Well, what we're hearing is that the Taliban's own Rahbari Shura, their leadership council for last more than a decade, that's led the Taliban insurgency, most of it will be part of the new cabinet. Mullah Baradar, who was the senior Taliban leader who led the negotiations with the US, is expected to have a senior position. Some people are expecting, or some Taliban sources told Reuters, for example, that Baradar may achieve the equivalent role of a prime minister. Meanwhile, Hibatullah Akhundzada, who's the group's senior leader, the supreme commander, is expected to hold the ultimate senior position of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Although Mr. Akhundzada has not been public for a while, which has given rise to rumors that he may not be alive, but today the spokesman, Mr. Mujahid, said that Mr. Akhundzada is very much alive and he'll show himself in public. People, as you say, while even in Kabul, they were fearful of a Taliban takeover. And after the Taliban takeover, because banks were closed, because ATMs were empty, because prices were soaring, people wanted relief from that. They were running out of cash. They couldn't afford to buy food and water and everyday necessities. So they want the new government to relieve them of their financial crisis. They want, the new government to be inclusive. They want the new government to protect the gains of the last 20 years, which include rights of the minorities and women, and things like freedom of press. Nobody knows how much of that will be protected. The Taliban are promising a lot. But whether they'll be able to deliver all of that, and they're promising that they will, but we have to watch and see. The Taliban also have said that they're receiving aid from countries, UAE, other countries. They're receiving food aid. Qatar and Turkey are helping them with the airport, making sure that it's restored, the Kabul airport. So Taliban are calling on all their neighbors and the rest of the world to continue helping Afghanistan after a devastating war that the Taliban say left the country in shambles.
Yeah, and I know that a number of countries are quite wary about, how this relationship with the Taliban will go. But Aisha, I'm not sure you talked about this. The last province, Panjshir, you mentioned that, at the start of this conversation. Why is it so significant to the Taliban now that it is under their control?
Well, first of all, Panjshir was where Ahmad Shah Massoud, the famous resistance fighter, lived and resisted Taliban successfully in the 90s. So it has a symbolic value. Without overtaking Panjshir, Taliban would never be considered rulers of all of Afghanistan. And secondly, the Taliban understood that if Panjshir continued to resist them, that may give rise to other resistance movements or may give heart to other people in the north of the country who may join the Panjshiris in resisting them. The Taliban are mainly Pashtun, although now they claim they have other ethnicities among their ranks, but mainly Pashtuns. So the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, the Hazaras are fearful of them and any possible revenge killings, retributions, etc. So if Panjshiris, which are mostly Tajiks, and they had some former special forces and Afghan military forces who made their way to Panjshir with them. If that continued to fight Taliban, Afghanistan would not be considered under their control. So I think Taliban really thought that they needed to have Panjshir under their wing before they could declare a final victory.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of work to do. And looking forward, to the announcement and who makes the government. Aisha, thanks again for speaking with me.
Thank you for having me.
Stay a bit more in the region. Israeli authorities have launched a manhunt after 6 Palestinian prisoners escaped from one of the country's most secure jails overnight. The men are believed to have dug a hole in the floor of their cell at Gilboa prison, then crawled through a cavity and tunneled beneath the outer wall. Officials were alerted by farmers who noticed them running through fields. The fugitives include a former leader of the militant group Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade and 5 Islamic Jihad members. An Israeli prison service official described the escape as a major security and intelligence failure. Palestinian militant groups have hailed it as heroic. Turn our attention now to the Republic of Guinea, as the junta that ousted President Alpha Condé says a new government would be formed within weeks. Leader of the junta, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, who incidentally served in President Condé's government, has promised there will be no witch hunt against former officials. Apart from the video which emerged on Sunday showing President Alpha Condé amidst soldiers, not much is known about his fate or whereabouts.
Soldiers in Guinea staging an uprising in the capital on Sunday, claiming to have dissolved the constitution and the West African state's government. An unidentified soldier draped in Guinea's national flag says the group plans to form a transitional government and that further details would be given. Meanwhile, videos appearing to show the country's president Alpha Condé being detained by Army Special Forces circulated on social media. It was posted just hours after reports of heavy gunfire broke out near the presidential palace in Conakry. Several sources have claimed an elite national unit led by former French legionnaire Mamadi Doumbouya was behind the unrest.
We have decided, after taking the president who is with us now, to dissolve the current constitution. We also decided to dissolve the government, to close the land and air borders. We call on our brothers in arms to unite in order to respond to the legitimate aspirations of the people of Guinea. We also invite everyone to stay in their bases and continue their usual activities. We will not make the same mistakes as in the past.
Right now, it is not clear who holds power in Guinea. The Guinean Defense Ministry said the attack on the palace by mutinous forces and an attempted insurgency had been put down. Earlier, videos shared on social media showed military vehicles patrolling Conakry streets. One military source said the only bridge connecting the mainland to the Kaloum neighborhood, which houses the palace and most government ministries, had been sealed off. Many soldiers, some heavily armed, were posted around the palace. In the meantime, residents in the Guinean capital of Conakry celebrate after the country's special forces soldiers apparently ousted Guinea's long-serving president, Alpha Condé. President Condé won a third term in October after changing the constitution to allow him to stand again, despite violent protests from the opposition, raising concerns of further political upheavals in a region that has seen coups in Mali and Chad in recent months.
More the situation in Guinea in a moment. Plus, up ahead, we'll also get a sneak peek into Egypt's upcoming high-tech new capital. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. All eyes still on Guinea here on the continent as leader Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya promises to produce a new government within weeks. He also says there will be no witch hunt against former officials. Professor of African History, Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of Ibadan, Isaac Olawale Albert joins us now. Professor Albert, thank you for joining me on the program. You think this coup was inevitable in Guinea because we're seeing almost the same scenarios that played out in Mali months ago?
Well, I think for students of conflict analysis, Guinea was a problem or a disaster waiting to happen, given the historical antecedents of that country and then given the fragility of that country, we had a military coup in 1980, 2003, 2010, 2012. So when Conde came in the year 2010, one expected him to be a leader that will help to stabilize that country according to the peace and security architecture of ECOWAS. But in 2015, he sought a second term, and then in 2020, he changed the constitution of that country, and he got the so-called third term. Now, one would have expected Conde to show leadership by leaving office after the second term. This would have helped to consolidate democracy in that country, but it never happened. But the question we should be asking ourselves is, when Conde, refused to adhere to the existing peace architecture of West Africa, one would ask the question, what did ECOWAS and African Union, what did they do?
Right, and that's also the question we're asking now, because the ECOWAS and African Union, as you rightly point out, have responded to what's going on in Guinea. They condemn, this junta, like they did with Mali, which is the closest example we have right now. They've condemned, what's going on in Guinea, including Nigeria. What can they do instead this time to produce results? We've already gone past, them not even acting when they should have. But going forward, what can they do so that we don't have a repeat of what's been going on the continent?
Well, I think the first point we have to make here is that ECOWAS, African Union, and even the United Nations knew that this disaster will happen. But the question we need to ask ourselves is, what did they do? Now, if they did not act appropriately when due, one would argue here that it seems all these intergovernmental organizations seems to have lost their moral fiber and moral credentials for actually condemning. I mean, things happen in Africa, and what you see from each of the intergovernmental organizations is to condemn. But now we have to face the fact that preventive deployment of the military or peacekeeping missions are becoming less and less attractive to the international community because it is very expensive and, of course, very costly in terms of humanitarian cost, in terms of political aftermath. Now, what nations of the world are doing now is to invest more on preventive diplomacy. And preventive diplomacy has to do with intergovernmental organizations responding as the citizens of affected countries are complaining. All over Africa, citizens are complaining of bad governance. They are complaining of dictatorship. They are complaining of unemployment, but we do not actually see the right kind of actions being taken. And I think these are the issues. So long as the
sorry for interrupting you, but what would be the way forward for Guinea now? I mean, we already gone past, what the international community should have done.
The way forward for Guinea is not going to be different from the way forward for Mali. It's not going to be different from the way forward for Libya. It is negotiation, because ECOWAS, African Union, lacks the capacity to fund any peacekeeping mission to any country that is violating the existing continental protocol on unconstitutional government. This is an unconstitutional government, but I don't think there is anything that any country can do at this moment other than to negotiate with the military junta in that country. And the leader of that group, Mamadi Doumbouya, has actually told your world that he's going to rewrite the constitution of that country, and therefore we are in for another long distance race. You will rewrite the constitution, and then there will be preparations for elections. Another round of elections will be conducted, and then you have all the kinds of conflicts that you have associated with elections in Africa.
Right.
I think we have another big problem in our hands.
Professor Isaac Olawale Albert, there are more questions, of course, than answers as we continue to watch the Guinea situation unfold. Thank you again for starting the conversation with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, staying on the continent a bit more, we're learning about the son of late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, Saadi, being freed from prison where he's been since 2014. Saadi was once a former commander of Libya's special forces. He was famous for attempting an Italian football career. He'd signed on with Perugia, but rarely stepped on the pitch in 2003. Was accused of killing the Libyan football coach Bashir al-Rayani in 2005, as well as committing crimes against protesters when the uprising against his father began in 2011. After his father was killed in the same year, he fled to Niger, but was extradited back to Libya, where he was cleared of his crimes. He's said to be right now on his way to Turkey following his release. As we end the program, Egypt is planning a high-tech leap with a new capital, which will see the creaking capital, Cairo, move to a smart city with surveillance technology aimed at detecting crime and enhancing safety. Let's take a look.
In Egypt's new capital on the outskirts of Cairo, residents will be able to use smart cards and apps to unlock doors and make payment and surf the web on public Wi-Fi beamed from lampposts. This is part of efforts to build a smart city, a proposed design that's a world away from parts of the existing sprawling capital, where creaking infrastructure can mean patchy internet and phone coverage. The city being built from scratch in the desert, so far called the new administrative capital, is designed to hold 6.5 million residents and is expected to open to its first civil servants later this year.
We have the most modern applications for managing, for example, a criminal case. So, for example, when there is something going on and we have information saying that there is a car of a certain color, that is an SUV, for example, that was there, we will be able to find that car within the administrative capital and know where it was, where it traveled.
Authorities plan to repeat and synchronize the technology through all the developments championed under President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, for whom the new city is a flagship project. Some Egyptians see the new capital being for privileged elites in a country where nearly a third of the population live below the poverty line, but others see the technological boost as long overdue.
You know, in the sense, why have this smart city? Well, I mean, if there is any concern in the future that people might gather in the new capital city to protest, and that the Egyptians want to have another way to deter those kind of demonstrations and or to identify who might participate, this will help them. So that, you know, that it does add that effect in terms of setting a certain set of conditions when it comes to who might actually protest or demonstrate in the new capital city. But beyond that, you know, I don't see what it would really add beyond what they already are doing, which is very extensive.
Officials say surveillance technology will be aimed at detecting crime and enhancing safety, and that data will be protected by Egyptian law and international standards.
Really interesting. Looking forward to that. Well, thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.